Yeah, I mean, well, it sort of came from the idea of not doing it with any particular template or expectation. It was just, I didn't really know who was going to listen to it or what was going to happen as a result of it. It was just, in fact, it was the first time that I was doing it completely outside of the intention of entering any sort of community. Like Ghost Hustler definitely had a community that I wanted to tap into, and that was sort of our objective throughout the course of that project, was to sort of start playing shows with like-minded artists. And with Neon Indian, I didn't really know who those artists were, so there wasn't really a worry as to what was a good or bad idea. It was just a question of context. I mean, I feel like there's been a natural chronology in music in the past year that is really sort of catered to lo-fi electronic music, or just even like I see like just electronic music as a psychedelic medium in general is such a thing that's been like I almost feel like it's been what would be the word? I feel like the definitive statement has been, people like Animal Collective or Gang Gang Dance, that sort of have this really bizarre kind of tribal aesthetic or approach to psychedelic music, and it's done with like samplers, and it's done with synths, and it's done with, a collection of just like interesting found sounds, and what happens when you manipulate them and recontextualize them to personalize them into your music, and I think that's a very new thing. I find it really amazing that in a lot of ways, like one could construe punk rock as instead of just like going out buying a Fender Strat and a cheap shitty amp, you can buy a laptop and a copy of Ableton Live, and that can be your own way of expressing yourself in this new medium. And I see so many kids that are so stoked about that. Like that's what they want to do. They want to like time warp sounds and recontextualize them and sort of develop that ear. And I think it's really cool, I think it's a very exciting time, because in a lot of ways I feel like electronic music can be sort of dictated by the technology that's out, and you see a lot of, it's one of the few genres that creates currents just from whatever new toy is available, It comes from, it's from a very intuitive place, which I really enjoy. I think it's a good conglomeration of both, like the reason I like electronic music is because I've never seen a genre of music where people value the guys who tailored the instruments just as much as the artists themselves, like you see Dave Smith or Bob Moog or Roger Lynn as like these heroes who created this really bizarre sounds, and there's a whole culture that derives from that, and I think that's really cool, is that you can hear like in pop music especially, it always seems to be like the perfect template for that, especially in the 80s, like whatever synth was developing or becoming like the most popularized kind of style was being dictated almost entirely. Like there's a whole shift in pop music in the 80s where people started using FM synths, and you start hearing it like Michael Jackson records and Prince records, and it becomes like the new kind of sound, and it's really interesting to sort of see that chronology, because it's great when people can take something that really is just like a completely empty canvas, like a sampler, and just invent a genre with it, there's something really valuable about that. I mean, I've always kind of believed that like if you're confident enough to put out a piece of music and give it definition and give it an album name and to put it out in bulk, then you should be confident enough to back it up with a really interesting and great live show, and now the one downside to blog culture is that you get a lot of bands that you catch very early on in development, and they feel immediately pressured to just like put something together with a laptop and a microphone or something, and then they just go out there and perform, and it's something that sort of develops over time, and it's a work in progress, Whereas with a label, they've already run the whole gauntlet before you ever even listen to them, But I kind of like that too, because you create a lot of really interesting characters that way. I feel like a lot of people are interested in music or in artists, not just through the things they put out, but like through the kind of narrative that's there, through what's happening that's influencing the music, and how they're developing their live show, and what's happening with their studio time, and it's kind of cool. I mean, I totally geek out and look at any bit of content I can find on bands I like and just be like, oh, so that's what it's like, in Holy Ghost Synth Dungeon, like that's pretty cool. But yeah, pretty much independent labels are just not only the smartest but the safest bet for any artist, because oddly enough, it's like people used to sign to major labels because there was a stability there, that it would be there and the resources would always be there, and that you'd never have an issue with putting out your record, but in exchange you would compromise a lot of the artistic integrity behind it. And it's almost the complete opposite now. It's like now people go to people go to indie labels because they make really smart decisions and they're very conservative about the way in which they operate, which implies a lot of longevity and like an airtight aesthetic. Like, I mean, that's why I love DFA Records. Like, they don't put something out unless they really believe in it, and I've always been, you know, pretty inspired by that. But I feel like now, because of that, there's a lot of really unusual sounds, you know, like in the sense that, like, I've never seen so many genres pop up overnight, and especially with the internet, where you know, microcosmic music genres can proliferate in like a matter of hours, you know, and you can have like suddenly one band, you know, equates to like 12 bands. Right now I'm working on the Vega record, and I should have it done by the end of May, and though I can't say who's producing it yet, and I'm constantly saying this, I almost want to just spill the beans this Friday at the Fool's Gold Showcase. But yeah, I can say it's an extended member of the Fool's Gold family that I take quite a bit of influence from, and I'll be putting it out through them as well. So yeah, that's kind of what's in store immediately. You know, I think the next Neon Indian record I'm probably going to start sometime in the fall. I really kind of want to sit on it for a second and think about what I want that sound to be. You know, I think that there's such an open template for Neon Indian that it can really go anywhere. And Sleep Paralysis, you know, the new single, was kind of an example of that. I mean, like, it's not Neon Indian 2.0. It's not where the next album's going to go. You know, but it's just what I like to do, which is to get in the studio with people and work on music, you know, and just kind of play it one track at a time, you know.